At the HFY Adventure, we tell stories the human way, real voices, real emotion. Subscribe to keep it real. I'm Jessica. Let's begin. The Concordance station always smelled faintly of ozone and recycled citrus, a scent engineered to calm visiting species with incompatible biochemistries. Leo Marsh suspected it existed mainly to calm junior diplomatic assistants like himself. The station's central ring rotated slowly, transparent walls, revealing a stitched panorama of distant stars, cargo traffic, and the occasional ceremonial cruiser gliding past with unnecessary elegance. Lee tried not to stare. Staring, he had learned, was often intended as a threat, a mating signal, or a declaration of war. Depending on who noticed, he adjusted the focal of his hippopotamus in as many minutes. The fabric was rated multi-cis acceptable, which meant it neither reflected light offensively nor shed fibers toxic to insecto lungs. It was also slightly too tech. Walked in Willa, a reminder that he had been promoted faster than his wardrobe budget. As an assistant, his job was simple: follow his superior, carry the data slate, sit where indicated, and above all, not become memorable. The circular council chamber loomed ahead, its doors parting with a dignified hum. Inside, the space was vast and precisely symmetrical, designed to offend no one by favoring no single perspective. The Huiliuwa seats were arranged in a perfect ring around a hollow center where holographic projections would soon bloom into START and treaty clauses. Each seat was subtly different, in the customizes to its occupant's physiology. Leo's, according to his slate, was auxiliary position 17, which sounded reassuringly insignificant. He followed the lunated path on the floor, counting under his breath 14, 15, 16, 17. He said the seat adjusted itself politely, cushioning his weight and aligning his spine. Success, he thought with quiet triumph. No tripping, no wrong appendage placement, no accidental insult. He allowed himself a small breath. Then he noticed the seat beside him. It was not a seat so much as a throne. Taller, broader, carved from a pale luminous alloy etched with symbols that shifted when viewed directly. It radiated absence. The way a missing demands attention. Leo froze. His slate flickered, then went a blank, as if refusing to be involved. A ripple passed through the chamber. Dead allegations arrived in procession, robes whispering, carapaces clicking. You wanted the ire. Atmospheric fields shimmering around those who required them. Leo sat very still, hoping invisibility was contagious. The throne beside him remained emptied. When Queen Silana entered, the room subtly reoriented itself. It was not an official protocol, just an instinctive adjustment, as if gravity itself hung. She looked almost human at first glance, pale skin, Haitian Nenthetess Celia, long blonde hair falling straight down her back, but the illusion faltered at her ears, long and elegant, tapering to tender, marked as something older. Another. Her expression was composed, regal, and tired in a way Leo recognized from long nights and impossible expectations. She approached the throne. Leo's internal monologue began to scream helpful suggestions like, run, apologize, and invent a sudden medical emergency. He pushed again the armrest to stand, her hand closed around his. Each of two, it was cool, firm, unmistakably real, not painful but unyielding. Leo looked up, eyes wide. She did not look at him. Her gaze on the watching council. Don't get up. Yin yao yue din yu wa, she said softly, her voice carried only to him by a discreet acoustic field. Stay here. Leo swallowed, his mind raced through diplomatic manuals, manner which covered this scenario. He nodded because nodding seemed less dangerous than screaming. Around them the council settled. The throne remained unoccupied, its meaning heavy in the air. Leo finally understood. The consort seat empty by design, sacred in its emptiness. The negotiations began. Voices layered over one another, translated into a neutral tone by implants. Leo barely trusted. Threats wore smiles. Promises hid knives. Leo sat beside the queen, acutely aware of his own breathing, of the way her grip tightened whenever a rival faction pressed too hard, then began to tingle. He considered this a small price to pay for galactic peace. At one point his stomach betrayed him with a quiet growl. Sana's fingers twitched. If you faint, she murmured, history will remember you very unkindly. He managed a smile he hoped conveyed competence rather than terror. I'll try to stay conscious, he whispered back. Outside, the stars drifted on, indifferent. Inside, Leo Marsh sat perfectly still, holding the hand of a queen. Liep, or a simple seater, wondering how a simple seating era had already become the most important moment of his life. Time inside the council chamber did not pass so much as stretch. Minutes elongated into careful eternities, measured not by clocks but by the tightening and loosening of Queen Senna's grip around Leo's hand. He became acutely aware of small things. The faint hum beneath the floor, beneath the panels, the way the air temperature adjusted every time a new speaker rose. Perceptible and nowhere, the precise angle at which his elbow would eventually cease to feel like part of his body. The first speaker was a totally encased in a translucent pressure field. Its voice had translated into something pleasantly neutral, despite the original apparently involving 3 simultaneous vocal cords. Leo focused on nodding at appropriate intervals. He had no idea what was being said, but nodding felt diplomatically versatile. The queen did not nod. She listened, unmoving, her posture carved from stillness. Only her fingers betrayed her. Tightening slightly when the speaker lingered too long on the phrase strategic imbalance. Leo's internal panic attempted to resurface, but it found itself oddly constrained by the situation. It was difficult to spiral when one was physically anchored to a monarch. Instead, his thoughts wandered into absurdatory. He wondered whether the historical record would note his name correctly or reduce him to something like unknown human handholder. He wondered if his supervisor was somewhere in the chamber, watching this unfold and silently disowning him. A data hologram bloomed in the hollow center of the chamber, projecting star system in soft rotating light. Borders pulsed gently, nectar shifting with each proposed amendment. The sight was mesmerizing. Leo leaned forward slightly, forgetting for a moment where he was. Queen Senna's hand tightened sharply. Still, she murmured. Right, sorry, he whispered, returning to his statue impression. The second speaker was more aggressive, their species favored directness. Minutiae, which in practice meant stating threats as if they were casual observations. As they spoke, Leo felt the queen's grip colder, more rigid. Lele, he glanced at her face from the corner of his eye. Up close her composure was extraordinary, but he could see the effort behind it. The way her jaw set just a fraction tighter than necessary. His arm had now progressed from tingling to a numb floating sensation. He debated briefly whether it would be rude to lose circulation during peace talks. He decided it probably would. You're doing well, Sina said quietly without turning her head. The word startled him. I am. You haven't screamed or attempted escape, she replied. Both are common reactions. He bit back a laugh. It escaped anyway. Though a small ill-timed sound. Several delegates glanced in their direction. Leo froze eyes forward. Silana's thumb pressed lightly against his hand. A warning and a reassurance all at once. The negotiations continued. A break was called, symbolic mostly as no one moved. Nutrient fields adjusted, allowing species to absorb sustenance without leaving their seats. Leo felt a faint warmth pass through him, the station's best approximation of lunch. It tasted like disappointment in citrus. During a particularly long procedural dispute, Senna leaned a fraction closer. If you must panic, she said, do it internally. The chamber amplifies emotional spikes. I'll panic very quietly, Leo whispered back. I've had practice. There she almost smiled. Almost. Hours passed. Leo learned the rhythm of her reactions, the subtle cues that signaled when a comet struck too close to grief. When arrival was testing the silence of the empty throne beside them, he began to understand why his presence mattered. 2 seats occupied suggested continuity, strength. The illusion that loss had not hollowed the queen's authority. At one point a delegate gestured pointedly at the empty throne. The chamber seemed to hold its breath. Leo felt Sana's hand tremble just once. Without thinking he shifted his fingers, adjusting his grip, grounding rather than restraining. It was a small motion. He was a yukwana, probably visible to everyone else. The queen exhaled slowly. She did not release his hand. As the psycho lights dinged, the negotiations were nearing the end. Leo realized something unsettling. He was no longer counting the minutes. The tension remained sharp and dangerous. But purpose perhaps, or connection, forged in shared stillness. When another speaker rose to challenge the queen directly, Leo felt her grip tighten again. He braced himself, shoulders squared. Leshalila Toya, ready to sit through whatever came next. If history demanded a witness, he would remain exactly where he was. After all, standing up now would be far more terrifying. By the time Leo's arm returned from complete numbness to a dull, throbbing approximation of life, he had begun to suspect the council at chamber exited outside conventional time. The lights overhead shifted through imperceptible cycles, meant to soothe circadian rhythms across dozens of species. But all they really did was remind him that hours were passing and he was still holding the queen's hand like an accidental heir. The chamber's central projection dissolved and reformed. Kiwa, now displaying a lattice of trade corridors threading through disputed space, each line pulsed in a different color, some budded chromis, others flickering ominously. Leo was had them with forced interest. Watching holograms was safe. Holograms did not ask him to speak. A delegate from a methane-breathing consortium began outlining economic concessions. The translator rendered their words in a calm, almost cheerful tone that did not quite mask the underlying hostility. Leo felt Sana's fingers tighten again. This time, however, there was something else beneath the tension. And to his shift patient, you're about to hear a lie, she murmured so softly he wondered if he imagined bad. Was it a complicated one of the insulting kind? The insulting kind, she said. They prefer efficiency. The lie arrived right on schedule, wrapped in concern and mutual benefit. Leo did not understand the specifics, But he recognized the cadence of manipulation. He had heard it in budget meetings and performance reviews. Scaled here to interstellar proportions. He squeezed Silana's hand once before he could stop himself. A reflexive human response to nonsense. Her thumb brushed his knuckles. Approval. She spoke then. Dantidia, her voice carrying effortlessly across the chamber. It was calm, measured, devastating. She dismantled the argument piece by piece, referencing historical precedents, economic models, and one obscure treaty clause. Le was fairly certain no one else remembered. The hologram adjusted in real time. Trade lines shift in color as her words landed. The methane breather fell silent. Leo stared straight ahead, resisting the urge to grin. He had never before been this close to someone winning war with grammar. As the discussion moved on, he became aware of something strange. The delegates were watching him, not openly but with the sideways glances reserved for unexpected variables. He adjusted his posture. Leo suddenly self-conscious. He wondered if he should look more dignified or less alive. You can relax, Sana said, sensing his discomfort. They are trying to decide if you are important. Oh, I'm not? He whispered earnestly. I'm very, very replaceable. She considered this, that may be true. She said at the moment, you are useful. Leo wasn't sure whether to be offended or honored. He settled for quietly proud. Another break was called. The station's ambient system shifted again. As simulating a gentle dawn for species that required visual cues, Leo felt his stomach protest. He had long since exhausted the nutrient field's offerings, though, and his body was beginning to file formal complaints. If I pass out, he murmured. Please tell them it was a strategic feint. Senna's shoulder shook once, almost imperceptibly. It took Leo a moment to realize she was laughing. The negotiations took a darker turn. A rival faction referenced the late directly, their words sharpened with calculated cruelty. Muiya Asutaba. The empty throne seemed to loom larger, its silence oppressive. Leo felt Silana's grip tighten painfully, this time hurt without thinking. He leaned a fraction closer. Le woman. Not enough to draw to attention, just enough to be. He adjusted his Kabli prison hip, grip again grounding steady, his heart hammered. But he stayed. Sana did not look at him. Nah, she did not need to. Her response was brief and devastating, a reminder that grief did not equate to weakness. The chamber fell silent. Even the hum beneath the floor seemed dim. As the session dragged on, Leo realized something else had changed. The tension remained sharp as ever, but threaded throughout familiarity. Shared glances, quiet exchanges. A rhythm built on endurance and mutual restraint. When the psycho lights finally shifted toward closure, Leo felt an unexpected of disappointment. He had grown accustomed to this strange, impossible role. Anchor witness human shaped a symbol of continuity. The queen's hand was still wrapped around his, and for reasons he could not yet articulate. Miyoi Wadi. Tuaetia, he hoped it would remain there a little longer. The chamber grew quieter as the negotiations entered their most delicate phase. The pawn had more than fleets. Lintambatori ataturuya. Leo noticed the change not through sound, but through pressure. The air itself seemed to thicken as if the station were along with everyone else. His arm miraculously had settled into a tolerable state of existence. No longer numb, no longer screaming, merely resigned. A delegate with reflective skin rose slowly. Mien their surface rippling could treat the data. They spoke of balance, of mutual restraint, of the dangers of emotion unrecognized, the tacticarica mintilekam. This was not an argument meant to convince. It was one meant to provoke. He felt Sana's fingers tense, not sharply this time, but with a wary familiarity. Ligai, like someone bracing for a bruise they had learned to expect. You may hear something unpleasant, she murmured. I've worked in administration, Liu whispered back. I'm immune. That earned him another almost smile. It was becoming a pattern, these nearly visible reactions. Small cracks in the perfect surface of her composure that only he seemed close enough to notice. The thought was both thrilling and alarming. The reflective delegate continued. Kaisenju carefully circling in the absent, beside her. They never named the consort, never gestured openly at the empty throne, but every sentence bent toward it, implying fragility. Suggesting that loss had made the queen predictable. Leo felt anger spark surprising him with its intensity. He had no personal stake in interstellar politics, but he suddenly found himself deeply offended on Silana's behalf. She responded with silence. The chamber waited. Silence here was never emptied. It stretched, deliberate, forcing the speaker to confront it. Leo realized she was doing something risky. Silence could be read as hesitation or as absolute confidence. The line between the two was thin and deadly. He shifted slightly, just enough for his shoulder, just enough brushed the side of the throne. The contact sent a faint vibration through the alloy, a resonant hum that echoed softly. Several delegates stiffened. Leo froze, heart racing, convinced he had just committed a ceremonial violation punishable by exile or spontaneous disintegration. Sena's grip tightened. Then what done? She said quietly. Well done. he whispered incredulous. You reminded them the throne still exists, she replied. Empty does not mean irrelevant. The silence broke. Silana spoke then, her voice calm, precise, and edged with something sharper than anger. She acknowledged loss without dwelling on it. God reframed grief as continuity rather than rupture, and reminded the council that her authority did not derive from partner today. As she spoke, Yihom the holographic projections adjusted data aligning in her favor. Even the reflective delegates surfaced in their projections faltering. Li listened transfixed. He had thought power was loud, dramatic, unmistakable. He understood that real power was often quiet, patient, and deeply exhausting. As the arguments went, a procedural pause was announced. This time, several delegates actually shifted, stretching limbs, adjusting fields. Leo resisted the urge to slump. He maintained his posture with what he hoped was dignified endurance. You're remarkably still, Sana observed. I'm afraid if I move I won't stop, he admitted. I'll just roll out of the chamber and into space. That would complicate the minutes, she said. Please refrain. He snorted softly before he could stop himself. The sound echoed more than expected. A nearby delegate turned, their eye swiveling in mild alarm. Leo straightened, face careful neutral. Silana's thumb traced a small, reassuring circle against his hand. The final objections were raised and dismantled. The treaty text stabilized, its clause locking into place with soft harmonic tones. Mid the station systems registered the shift, lights brightening subtly, the background humming into something almost musical. Leo felt the change ripple through the chamber, tension easing fraction by fraction. He also felt something else quieter, but no less significant. A sense of shared survival. They had endured this together through hours of pressure and unspoken grief, through threats and almost smiles. As the council prepared to adjourn, Leo realized he was no longer simply reacting. He was present, engaged, part of the moment rather than a terrified accessory to it. The queen's hand remained in his, steady and warm now. What Nova happened next, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He was very glad he had not stood at the console, did not adjourn so much as hesitate on the edge of ending. Sawaya, as if reluctant to acknowledge that something fragile had actually held. Leo felt it in the way the chamber lights hover between states, not yet shifting fully to closure. The station systems, waiting for confirmation that no one would suddenly overturn the table and declare war out of spite. His hand was still in Savannah's. And he had reached the strange point where this no longer felt remarkable, it simply felt correct, like gravity continuing to function. A final delegate rose. One whose presence Leo had learned to dread. They belonged to a faction that specialized in patience, in saving their sharpwits for the very last moment. Their voice, once translated, was almost kind. They congratulated the council on its progress, praised the queen's composure, and then with surgical referenced her consort by name. The chamber reacted instantly as a subtle tightening of fields. A collective inhale. Leo felt Sana's hand clamp around his with sudden force, pain flaring bright and sharp. Her breathing changed just barely, but enough that he noticed. The empty throne seemed to loom again, its silence heavy with memory. For the first time since this ordeal began, Leo's mind went utterly blank. There was no protocol, no internal monologue, no frantic search for the correct response. There's only the sensation of her grip and the knowledge that this moment mattered more than all the others combined, so he leaned closer. It was not a grand gesture, he did not speak, Matsusuwa did not look at, the delegate did not even fully turn towards Silana. He simply shifted, reducing the space between them until their shoulder nearly touched. His hand adjusted around hers. No longer passive, no longer just held, but holding back. The pain eased, replaced by a steadier pressure. The delicate paused just for a fraction of a second. It was enough. You are Lucy Bujour. Senna lifted her head when she spoke, her voice carried something new. Not anger, not grief, certainty. She acknowledged the loss directly and ended without flinching. And then dismantled the implication that followed. She spoke of continuity, of governance designed to endure beyond individuals, of strength that did not vanish with love. The holographic text of the treaty responded, clauses locking, symbols stabilizing, the system recognizing finality. The delegate sat, the chamber released its breath. The light shifted fully now, the soft tonal change signaling agreement reached. The treaty finalized itself with a resin codec ho fat more the head and murmur. Letiana vibrating faintly through the throne, through Thoda's bones. He realized his heart was racing. He also realized that he was mile wide. Kenzo Jua. Ridiculous grin he quickly tried to suppress. Senna did not let go of his hand. Instead she leaned toward him just enough that only he could hear her. That was illogical, she said. I'm very good at that, Leo whispered back. It's my primary skill. A flicker of amusement crossed her face, unmistakable this time. The almost smiles had finally become real. As the council members began to rise, gathering data slates and retracting atmospheric fields, Leo felt a sudden wave of exhaustion crash over him. Adrenaline drained away, leaving behind the awareness that he had been sitting perfectly still for hours while the fate of multiple civilizations balanced precariously nearby. His legs protested. His spine filed grievances. Are you going to stand? Sienna asked quietly. He glanced at the throne, then at her hand still wrapped around his. I was waiting for permission, he said. Only half joking. She considered this for a moment longer than strictly necessary. Then gently she loosened her grip. The absence was immediate and startling. Leo would like a sound cutting out mid-note. Leo's hand felt cold where hers had been. You may, she said. He stood carefully, legs waddling away. He hoped looked dignified rather than tragic. He resisted the urge to bow, salute, or flee. Around them, delegates were departing, some casting curious glances, others deliberate in looking away. Deans already rewriting the narrative in their heads. As the chamber emptied, Leo became acutely aware of the silence. Not the heavy, threatening silence from before, but something calmer, reflective. The stars beyond the transparent walls drifted on unchanged, as if unimpressed by the day's accomplishments. He looked at Solana, then truly looked at her. No longer from the corner of his eye. Up close, without the weight of performance pants pressing down, she looked tired, relieved. Still very much a queen, but also unmistakably alone. Thank you, she said. The words landed harder than any threat had. Leo swallowed, unsure how to respond, and finally settled on honesty. Anytime, he said, preferably under less historic circumstances. She laughed softly, openly, the sound startling in the empty chamber. For the first time since he had sat down in the wrong seat, Leo sat in something else as well. This was not the end of what had begun. The council chamber felt impossibly large once it was empty. Without the layered voices, the shift fields, the quiet menace of watch stillness. It became a cathedral of light and glass. The holographic systems powered down one by one, leaving only the distant glow starting past the transparent walls. Suddenly Leo stood near the throne, hands clasped behind his back, suddenly unsure where to put himself now that the universe no longer required him to remain perfectly still. Queen Solana remained seated for a moment longer, her posture still regal out of habit, rather than necessity. When she finally rose, the movement was slower, unguarded. She seemed lighter without the weight of observation, though the fatigue beat it all was now impossible to miss. You may sit, she said, gesturing toward the throne beside hers. Leo blinked. I think I've reached my lifetime quota for that seat. A pity, she replied. You wore it well. He laughed, the sound echoed oddly in the empty space. It surprised him how natural it felt. He had been a bundle of nerves wrapped in formal fabric. Now standing here, Cheng felt steady as though he wasn't yet sure how. They walked together toward the chamber's edge, where the glass curved outward into the void. A ceremonial cruiser drifted past, its hull reflecting starlight like a slow-moving comet. For a while, neither of them spoke. At some point Leo said finally, someone is going to ask me to explain what happened today. Yes, Sana agreed. They will ask me as well. I'm considering pretending I was never here. She tilted her head, studying him with mild amusement. You would be a very poor emission. Her smile then grew thoughtful. I didn't plan any of this. I just sat down and stayed, she said, gently. Many would not have. The words settled between them warm and heavy. Leo realized that she was right. He had stayed, not because of protocol or fear or even ambition, but because at some point leaving had felt wrong. He had chosen presence for safety, connection over invisibility. That realization startled him more than anything else that had happened. Yikembe. A soft chime echoed through the chamber as station systems confirmed the treaty's successful transmission across secure channels. The agreement was official now, beyond undoing peace. At least the negotiated kind would hold. Sana exhaled slowly. It is done. It is, Leo said. You did it. We did, she corrected. He met her gaze, then really met it. Wah. And saw no trace of the distant monarch the council had faced. What he saw instead was someone who had carried grief with precision, who had ruled through silence and restraint. He had a wise self who had allowed herself, if only briefly, to rely on an accidental human assistant. I don't think I'm the same person I was when I walked in here, he admitted. Nor should you be, she said. Change is the cost of proximity. That sounded like wisdom or possibly a warning. Leo accepted. Panel slid open near the chamber entrance. Here needed Zila to the Yotin. Your aide appeared, bowed deeply, and froze when they noticed Leo standing beside the queen. The moment stretched awkward and familiar. This is Leo, Masha said calmly. Timia Ligania. He will be accompanying me for the remainder of the station visit. The aide nodded rapidly, already revising internal assumptions about reality. Leo cleared his throat. I should probably inform my supervisor, he said. They're gonna think I was abducted. Selana's lips curved. You were? She said That they moved toward the exit. Leo cast one last glance at the empty throne. It no longer radiated absence. It simply existed, a reminder of loss as a knowledge rather than hidden. He understood now what she had meant earlier. Empty had meant irrelevant. Corridor beyond was bright, alive and with motion and sound, the station resuming its endless rhythm. Leo walked beside the queen, no longer holding her hand yet feeling the echo of that connection with every step. He had come to concordance to be invisible. He was leaving having been seen.